So this is an idea where we're thinking, parents, we're thinking about you. And so we know sometimes as the school year has gotten back underway, things can be a little bit tough, and a lot is going can take place, can really move parents away from being able to date. So here is the deal. Well, we want to have the opportunity, parents, where we create a moment for you where you are able to spend some time together with us. We're going to talk about the second half of what we're talking about tonight in regards to measuring toxicity while your young people are upstairs. And if you decide you just want to drop them off and go out on a date on your own, you can do that. But we'll have a meal prepared for you. You'll meet with my wife and I right downstairs. Should be an exciting time. Should be a moment where we're able to have some fun. And then even before that, honey, we've got something else majorly coming up. Talk to us a little bit about Back to Church Sunday.
All right. So Back to Church Sunday is this Sunday, and it's at 10 o'clock, our regular worship time for our morning services. With Back to Church, we're inviting past, present, neighborhood, far away, but for the Walk of Dominion members, your guests, your family members, invite them back to church, because what we're going to have afterwards is just some light refreshments, and then some tables set up that starts talking about some of the ministries that we have at the Walk of Dominion. And we are just excited that folk are coming, and we want you to be a part of what God is doing in the great city of Newport News, in that little corner of 119 29th Street. Amen. So
Amen.
you're all welcome to come. I can't wait to meet all of you.
Absolutely. I love the way you say that we're the church with a heart for Newport News, in the heart of Newport News, right in downtown. And so let's get right on into some of this on tonight. It's going to be an exciting show as we gather tonight. So listen, a lot of times we spend so much talking about, there's been so much discussion about relationships and about this idea of things being toxic. And the reality is that we are indeed living in times where people really want to find love and life and like even lust, if you will, in terms of a covenantal relationships, while in many instances, many can be burned out on the idea of marriage and family. And so you and I, we developed something called the acid test a few years ago in regards to measuring toxicity. And so tonight, that comes to us from this idea and this concept of acidity and talking about water. And so, water has an acidity level that's got to be safe for people to be able to drink and to get engaged in. And we kind of looked at that from the pH balance. And for us, we know that the pH balance talks about personal happiness. But Darren, let me just put this up on the screen for people to be able to see. In order for something to be non-toxic, it's got to be above this number of 7, and I think it's 7 to 14, where it's something that becomes either alkaline or basic, and anything under 7, the toxicity level of it is very, very high. And we want you to stay in with us, because we're going to spend some time talking to us about how to determine if you're somebody that's toxic enough in the relationship, when we start to measure what toxicity levels really are and what that really is all about. And so, having said that, I'm going to go to the first video tonight and let's just deep dive in. And those of you who are coming in and tuning in, share this real quickly. This is going to be a good one on tonight when you start talking about who is toxic in the relationship. Who is toxic in the relationship? Is it me? Is it you? Is it us? Or is it them? And so I think it's an interesting thing tonight. So the next question tonight is, how do you know if you're a toxic person? Or how do you know if one that you're dating is toxic? How do you know if you're a toxic person? Or how do you know if one that you're dating or you're thinking about dating or getting into a relationship with is toxic? Before we get started tonight, I want you to take a few minutes, take a quick look. Take a look at this.
That you're in a relational or a marital crisis. Look, I'm all about helping you all create the healthiest relationships and the healthiest marriages, but you have to be aware of the signs so you know exactly what it is that you need to work on and what solutions you need to bring together, and also what conversations to open up. Number one, there's more conflict and more arguments over trivial matters. And these matters, these disagreements end up turning into attacks. Number two, both of you are emotionally withdrawn, and that withdrawal has now started to impact you all's intimacy and your attraction to one another. Number three, communication has declined greatly. You two aren't sharing or talking about your day, your daily activities, your daily interactions, and you're not having any deep conversations. You're probably not even speaking much. Sign number four, all those unresolved issues, those arguments, those past grievances, they're piling up. And now you two are probably more focused on reminiscing about the past hurts, past grievances, who did who wrong, rather than present solutions and present experiences. Number five, one or both of you all's perception of the marriage or your relationship is that it's no longer fulfilling and it's no longer satisfying. Number six, things that you all can do together, shared experiences, they feel like obligations and chores now. Whenever you think about sharing an experience with each other, you probably feel disgust or some type of resistance. And as a result, you're probably focusing on more of what you can do yourself, what you can do alone without your partner. I hope you all take this information and you utilize it to help you all work through your marriage or your relationship. I wish you all the best. Happy, healthy relationships. Bye, babies.
I think she was absolutely right on it. I'll give you the floor first, your thoughts
Now,
in
was
terms
she
of what she
talking
had to share.
about toxic relationships, or she was just talking about your relationship being in trouble?
She talked about your relationship being in trouble, but the
Oh,
idea
okay.
of the relationship
Yeah.
being trouble is what lends itself over to a relationship being toxic. And so trouble is the first step. Toxic is probably the last part of the step. So I wanted to start tonight with the idea that sometimes relationships can be in trouble and we don't even know that they're headed toward toxicity. But go ahead, give me your thoughts as we get started
Yeah.
tonight.
Honestly, sometimes it's because of toxicity that the relationship is in trouble.
Yeah.
Just to flip that on its head, it's sometimes it's in trouble and becomes toxic, but a lot of times it's because one or both are toxic that it gets to the point of what she's referring to.
Yeah, one or both are toxic.
Yeah.
When it actually gets to that point, I would agree. I think you're both right in terms of this one on tonight. I think you're absolutely both right, hitting the nail right on the head for this. When you even think about, toxic relationships and the acidity level, a lot of stuff has to do with, acid tends to burn. And a lot of times people have gotten burned in previous relationships, which keeps them from entering into the next relationship. And so tonight we're talking about how do you know if you're somebody that's toxic yourself, or if the relationship itself is you're in is an actually toxic relationship. And tonight we'll spend a little bit of time just from the subject matter of measuring toxicity. I'm gonna go ahead and jump right on in and get us started tonight with this this next video, because it's going to lead to my first one. And then I'll start the ball.
Marrying Shawnee Henderson, Pastor Keon Henderson was married to his ex-wife Felicia Henderson for 9 years before they divorced in 2019. While speaking at the Lighthouse Church's annual Cry Out conference in Houston, Pastor Henderson admitted he and Shawnee were both wounded by their divorces, and that's the reason he didn't want to marry the reality star initially. Pastor Henderson says he started self-sabotaging and probably missed 6 to 8 months of happiness with Shawnee because he wasn't happy with himself. Although he didn't want to marry Shawnee because he feared failing, Pastor Henderson says it wasn't about her, it was about him.
Wow. He says it wasn't about her, but it was about him. And so my first one tonight, in terms of whether or not you're toxic or whether or not somebody you're dating or in relationship with which is toxic, is the idea of self-sabotage. That's how one of the ways you can know. Self-sabotage, when you won't let people love you. Sometimes when we say we're getting back out there, or we're dating again, and sometimes the barriers that we create can become blockers and keep us from experiencing love. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've been burned before. And so what we're trying to do is protect ourselves, and to keep ourselves protected, we kind of put all of these extra measures in place without allowing someone to get close to us. And we put the new person through a completely bad experience while we've got what we just came from in the center of our minds, without realizing that we're actually poisoning somebody else for something someone else did to the person that we're now dating or trying to engage in relationship with now. I would dare say that when moments like that happen, that's one of the real ways that you can tell whether or not you're entering into a toxic relationship or whether the other person you're thinking about connecting with is toxic. Go ahead with your thoughts about that one, dear.
My, when I think about the acid test, I think about the question, the reality. You have to choose your burn. Choose your burn. But when I think of toxicity, the first clue to whether or not someone is going to be toxic in a relationship is, how do they tell their story? How do they tell it? Are they always the victim and never the victor? Is it never their fault? Is it that everybody else is doing something to me? It's all of that person's fault, and all they can do is list all of the deficiencies of their previous partner or partners, and they've had a multiplicity of partners, and all of them seem to do them wrong. You have to ask the question, well, what did you do in the relationship? Because it takes two to make it. It also takes two to break it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How do they tell their story? Are they always referencing the other person in terms of what they did wrong and never have a self-check on what it is that they themselves have done wrong? Right. And that also lends itself to self-sabotage. Sometimes when you're dating and you're kind of re-engaging, if you've gone through a divorce or if you've gone through a bad breakup, and now all of a sudden you're out and you're trying to re-engage again and you start telling your story, tune your ears in terms of how a person speaks, and then also pay attention to the patterns, because the patterns will let you know that they're putting up quote unquote barriers and boundaries, which really end up becoming blockers in each and every one of our lives. And people really won't allow you to get close to them to actually build the relationship. And so I agree with you. I think self-sabotage and also how one tells their story is a litmus test for wondering whether or not if someone is toxic or not. Go ahead if you've got another one. I'll throw the ball to you to start with the next one. If not, I'll keep right on.
How do they make you feel in their presence? And I want to say it this way: past, present, and future. So how do they make you feel when you think about when you're in their presence? When you're in their presence, do you feel intimidated? When you're in their presence, do you feel like something's going to happen to hurt you or harm you? How do you feel in their presence? How do you feel when you've left their presence? Do you feel drained? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel worried? Are you sad? Because sometimes there's a point where you miss somebody because you're not in their presence, and the when absence makes the heart grow fonder. But then there is when you get out of their presence, and there's a relief, like, oh, I made it. I got out. Right. But then when you remember or you reflect on them, how do you feel when you reflect on them? So some of this is going to have to really just be, how do you feel they're in their presence when you're with them, when you're not with them, or even when you're on your way back to them? How do you feel? What is your body telling you? What are your senses telling you about this person? Is there danger there? Because that's going to give you an awareness of what you're going to expect on a daily basis. Because if you live in a high anxiety daily, when you're dealing with the person, it's going to affect your health first. The first sign of an unhealthy relationship is your health starts to suffer. There are stomach issues, gastrointestinal issues usually show up first. Headaches show up, dizziness, confusion, because the wearing down of the body happens when you're living in this tense, anxious state. So we have to be careful, and we have to be aware. How do I feel when I'm with them and when I'm not with them? And make a determination.
Absolutely. I would agree. I want to caution us in regards to how we feel. As much as I agree, I also want to add this caveat to that. Sometimes when we are self-sabotaging, we can be tuned into our emotions, which are tied to a previous experience and past, which shapes our perspective of how we're engaging with the new person. And so if we always lean in on our feelings, which is why I say let's trust patterns more than feelings. Be observant of patterns, and if the patterns are the same and are lining up, because sometimes we can shoot our own selves in the foot when we are engaging with a new opportunity, new experience, new moment, but we're still tied to the previous past experience. Where that becomes the lens through which we see. And then that determines how we go about engaging with the new person. And sometimes the new person doesn't even stand a chance. And so as much as I am with you on discerning with feelings, I would rather you trust patterns so that you can make sure that you don't enter into another toxic moment again. Tonight, we're talking about how do you know if you are the toxic person or if the person you're engaging with is toxic. And so far with tonight, we've talked about self-sabotage a little bit. And then we've spent some time tonight also talking a little bit about how well do they tell their story? Are they always referencing the past all the time? And then a little bit tonight, we talked about how do they make you feel about their past, present, and future? Can you see yourself building a future with this person moving forward in terms of being able to measure whether or not you've entered into a toxic relationship? I'm going to actually share my screen again tonight because this next one ties very, very well with my next point. Let me just jump over here. Take a quick moment. Take a look at this.
Bringing other issues to the argument. Stop bringing other issues to the argument. One thing at a time. In the heat of the moment, it's like, yeah, now's the time for me to bring up everything, every grievance that I've had in the past, and I want to just pile it all up now since we can talk. Whew, no. And I done heard many things. Well, it's a pattern. Okay, well, if you see that it's a pattern, and in this moment we're talking about one thing, bring up the pattern at a separate time. It's hard to focus on one thing when you have like one thing coming from this angle and another thing. How can we focus on the actual issue that's at hand and actually create some type of solution to address this one thing if we have to focus on 5 other things? And then on the opposite side, if you're a person who's trying to use piling of those issues as a distraction, and then you're wondering why we never resolve an issue, well, I mean, there it is. You can't keep on sidestepping conversations. When things get tense, it's easy for you to become defensive and justify your feelings by bringing up all of these past occurrences, but it's confusing and it's not helpful. I wish you all the best. Happy, healthy relationships. Bye, babies.
She is just on it for me on tonight. Kitty just gets it done for me. As she talks about, a lot of times men talk about they want to address one specific issue, and addressing this one specific issue, a lot of times 7, 8, 9, 10 other issues get piled on top of the addressing of that one issue. Let me tell you what that really is. What that really is an unwillingness to say I'm sorry. A lot of times you can tell you're in a toxic relationship with someone when they are not when they're not willing to admit the areas where they are wrong or where they need to improve or where they need to change. And instead of addressing the one issue, they will end up putting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 issues on top of the one issue to deflect away, rather than just simply being able to say, I'm sorry, and have a moment where they're willing to be held accountable for whatever the behavior is or thought is or idea is that's causing the spouse or intended other to feel uncomfortable. And so a lot of times people can deflect away rather than simply saying, I'm sorry, I will look to do better, or I was not aware of that, and that I was not aware that this made you feel this way. I think that is so important to be able to make sure that the relationship is non-toxic versus being toxic. Go right ahead.
I would, so that my next one would be, are you being cultured, or are you, or is it costing you? So iron sharpens iron. Is this person that you're with allowing you to grow, promoting, pushing you to grow, and promoting you? Are they actually for you, or is it like a crab trying to pull you back down so that you can't go beyond them? Because oftentimes what you find in relationships that are toxic is this competition where the person wants all of you, and no outside influences. And so they want all of your time, they want all of your attention, they want all of your resources and your money, but they don't want to give. They're not giving back. And so it's draining you. And it's getting to the point where by the time you're finished with them, you're so drained and you're so dry. You've given out life, you've given out yourself, but nothing has been deposited back. It's just been constant withdrawals. And when you find that there's some term, that love bombing, where they're at the beginning of the relationship, they pour on all this charm and gifts. But what happens is, as time goes on, then they start to withdraw their attention and withdraw the affection, making the other person want to then give more and do more. And but the person is consistently withdrawing that affection. Has the affection waned in the relationship? So are you being cultured to grow together to where you're sharpening each other, or is it costing you? Is it costing you financial stability? Is it costing you emotional stability? Is it costing you relationships outside of that union that you have with that person? Is it affecting those outer relationships, even your job and career? How is it costing you versus how is it culturing you?
Absolutely. I completely and totally agree. When you leave them, are you constantly drained all the time? Are there moments where you're being poured into? Or I'd even ask this one, are they so distracted and prioritizing the issues that are a concern to them that they're not even keyed in and focused and keyed into you, or focused in on what it is that you need in terms of the relationship? That's another one of how you can know when the relationship you're in is really, really toxic. I got another video tonight. I think this is going to be my last one, but it's going to tie to my next two. Let me go ahead on and see if I can't enlarge my screen. Take a moment, take a quick look at
this. Does not rebuild trust. How many times have they sat in my office, and let's say a husband's been unfaithful to his wife, and he's repented, he's broken off the relationship, he's apologized, and she's chosen to forgive him. Now they're in my office trying to rebuild their relationship. And she will say to me, Dr. Chapman, I have forgiven him, and that's why I'm here. I really want to work on our marriage. But to be honest with you, I don't trust him.
Yeah.
And I say, welcome to the human race. Forgiveness does not restore trust. Trust is broken when we break our commitments to the other person. Trust can be reborn, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And so I would say to that husband, now if you want her to trust you again, here's what I suggest. You say to her, honey, my cell phone is yours anytime you want to look at it.
Yep.
My computer is yours anytime you want to look at it. If I tell you I'm going over to George's house to help work on his car, if you want to come over there and see if I'm there, it's fine.
Good.
I'm through with deceit. I've hurt you enough. I don't ever want to do it again. She'll come to trust you again.
Yep.
When you're trustworthy over a period of time, she'll come to trust you again. But forgiveness, I think sometimes people put themselves down because they have forgiven, but they don't trust. And they feel like, well, I should trust them again, Well, it takes time for trust.
I think you freed some people with that, giving them the understanding of themselves and allowing them to give grace for themselves. Because I can imagine so many people feel like that. Like, he's asked for forgiveness. We're going through counseling, but I still don't trust him.
Yeah.
And
forgiveness does not.
I can't even say all of what I want to say for the sake of time with that one. I think a lot of times people misunderstand what Dr. Chapman is trying to communicate to us there. We have two pendulum ends here. One is forgiveness, and then the other one is trust. In between the two of those is that R word, repentance. And repentance actually means a change of mindset, which would mean a change of behavior. And a lot of times you can tell if you're in a toxic relationship or not, or the other person is toxic, or you might be the one who's toxic, because saying I'm sorry, you see that as suffering. See, when you see accountability as suffering instead of building trust, especially if you are the the offending person, I would absolutely say that's toxic. Because in order to produce change, there has to be a process over time with transparency, particularly if you're the person that has created the offense, and that's male or female.
Right.
And that applies across the board in a whole lot of different areas when it comes down to the sexual relationship, the financial relationship, the emotional part of the relationship, even in regards to your spirituality in the relationship. Accountability and transparency helps to rebuild trust. I know I was talking to, one of the children. I won't mention the name, but one of the children was beginning to really question what I was doing, getting up early in the mornings on Mondays, and I'm leaving the house so early. Well, it's because I'm going down to the church, and I'm always down there every Monday. That's my prayer time, where I don't only pray for me, my children, our household, the children here, everything that we've got going on in our lives. That's the time I get downloads and instruction. Well, the continued repetitive part of that helps to build trust for you. I actually explained to this particular child, I said, one of the reasons why your mother is in relationship with me is because she knows I'm going to pray. And she knows that I'm going to seek God. And she knows if I'm not up on Monday morning praying, that is a concern for her. So the transparency and the trustworthiness is built over time. And I don't think people understand that trust is not something that you just give away automatically. No, trust is earned over time through consistency. I'll say that again. Trust is earned over time through consistency. But when you can see it as suffering moments for you, you really are self-centered, and you're not really a self-serving or a person that's seeking to be a blessing to someone else in relationships. And for me, that's toxic. Go right ahead. Anything you want to add on any of that?
Well, I was just thinking he was probably watching you to make sure, because if you weren't going to where you said you were going to go, he was going to get you. he was looking out for his mom. But if I had anything lastly to say, it would just be, how do the two communicate?
Yeah.
What are the words that are coming out of their mouth? What is that thing? Can you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? But how do they communicate one with the other? Are the words damaging? Are the words like knives? Are they cutting you up and causing you to feel like you're worthless, or you don't matter, or what you say is unimportant? Words matter. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. And verbal abuse is often more damaging than the physical abuse. The physical abuse we see, the verbal abuse we don't. But it's tearing down the emotional makeup. It's tearing down confidence. It's tearing the person down. And it can be on either side. Women do it as well as men. But that verbal abuse will tear down that person's psyche and tear them down emotionally. So how do you communicate?
Absolutely. Well, tonight we're way over time. We know we got a little bit started later on tonight, but honey, I just want to remind those that coming up shortly here is, number one, Back to Church Sunday. We want to invite you out September the 15th. If you haven't found a faith family, consider joining us in the Walk of Dominion at Dominion Outreach Worship Center. And then number two, right along with that, parents, we had you in mind. And so we're calling it Parents Night Out, ages 4 to 11. You can drop your young person right off with us. They'll have a nice play date time upstairs in our fellowship hall. And parents, if you want to go out to date, go right on ahead and do that. But I want to encourage you to join in with us as we're going to do part 2 of this. It'll be from 7:30 to 9:30 on the 20th, measuring toxic relationships. We're just going to have a conversation. Go to dow.church, take time, register for that. We want to know how many people we want to feed, and we want to know how many young people we want to serve. And so we look forward to seeing you. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
God bless you.
We'll see you again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Since you changed my life, I know millions didn't make it.